get to see this later on. So today we're going to talk about training load management, periodization and tapering. So this topic is something that hasn't received a whole amount of press or a whole amount of research in dance. It's something that we're looking at in sport quite a lot, and it's really about managing how much dancing and how much work we do and how to structure that and timetable it so that we peak at the right time, and also to protect against exposure to too much injury and to ramp up performance at the same time. So we're going to look at a couple of things. So we're going to talk about what training load actually is. Then we're going to talk about periodization. So periodization is fancy planning. So it's basically about how we schedule and how we timetable both at the macro level, so over the year, smaller blocks, and even week to week to optimize peaking and performance. We're going to do some practical exercises, and I'm going to show you how to schedule these blocks over the course of the year. And then we're going to talk about tapering. So tapering, as you know, is trying to reduce or trying to modify the amount of activity that we do to ensure that we peak at the right time. And finally, we talk a little bit about workshops. So workshops are something that we all engage in, and they're very useful. They're going to be particularly of note, I think, after we come out of this COVID-19 period and people get back to more standard methods of teaching and interfaces. But the way workshops are scheduled and the way the components of what we do is really important, in that we don't overload dancers, particularly after a prolonged break, like in the summer or like a situation as is today. So load is essentially the amount of work we do, and there's lots of ways to measure load, but for the purposes of today we're going to keep it pretty simple. So we're going to look at internal measures of load and external measures of load. So an internal measure of load that we commonly use is rate of perceived exertion. How difficult did we find the session? So for me, if I'm doing a jig or say a heavy session, I might find it really difficult. I might find it an 8 out of 10. For somebody else, they might find it a 3 out of 10. So it varies from individual to individual how difficult they'll find something. And that might depend on how fit they are, how stressed they are, their general fatigue, what else is going on in their life. So it's very individual, and that's why training load needs to be measured person by person, and it needs to be recorded in that way. And we multiply that then by the length of the session. So if it's an hour, we might have a score of 5 multiplied by 1 hour. So we might have a score of 5 for that session, and we will record that for all the sessions that we engaged in during the week. Of note, if we do more than one session of dancing a day, we need to record each of these individual sessions. For us as Irish dancers, unless you're in a university setting where you have multiple different classes, they tend to be kind of one longer session per day, or however many times a week that you'd engage in your dancing. But for other dance genres like ballet or contemporary, they might do a couple of different sessions, and they'd need to record scores for each of those different sessions. The training paradox then is something that's discussed a lot in sport, and it's about finding the balance about doing too much and too little. And again, it's a very individual concept. So what we're trying to do is find the sweet spot, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a sec. Of concern are our unidisciplinary adolescent athletes. So a unidisciplinary athlete is somebody who just does one type of activity to a high level, and most dancers, Irish dancers included, tend to be unidisciplinary athletes, and that is because they're so demanding. There's so much training involved, so much time, so much commitment, so much money, or there might be reasons that you don't want to, for instance, do both ballet and Irish dancing because the aesthetics are quite different, and in terms of style they might interfere with each other. So what we do know is that unidisciplinary athletes, because they don't do lots of other stuff, they use the same muscles in the same way over and over again, and they're more exposed to injury. And that's a consideration when we're prescribing load. And adolescent athletes, as I spoke about in my previous talk about risk factors for injury, they have very seismic changes in their physiology, in their psychology during adolescence. The only time that we grow and change that fast is when we're small children. So they are at particular risk for physical and psychological burnout. So we need to be really mindful of our unidisciplinary adolescent athletes. So with all of this stuff, our aim is to design or to grade our exercise appropriately to improve fitness, our strength, our resilience, to protect against injury, and to lead to greater performance and resilience in competition. So this is what I spoke about a couple of minutes ago in terms of training load and performance. So our training sweet spot is up around, if I move my cursor up here, it's up around here. So if we undertrain, if we don't do enough training, we've lots of recovery time, our performance doesn't really increase. And over here, if we do too much training and we have serious injury recovery, then our performance will drop again. So we want to kind of get into this optimal training curve where we have a good balance between the amount of work we're doing, the amount of recovery that we're getting, and that manifests in best performance. So what we know about load management in dance, and as I said, there's relatively little research on this area, but we know that for elite level dance, it involves intense physical training and lots of it, and we all know that. The research indicates that dancers tend to overtrain, so they think more is better all the time. And I think we're all guilty of thinking about that, to just get the last few days in before the competition. And they're very susceptible also to burnout and to stress and fatigue, physical and psychological stress and fatigue due to overload. We know that the evidence standards say that there's high stress, but there's a low understanding, and I would say a low appreciation of the importance of rest and recovery. So we know that we need to get a balance between training and non-training stress and recovery to get these performance improvements. So a couple of just findings in youth athletes related to what I spoke about earlier. More specialised athletes, like Irish dancers, they have a higher likelihood of an injury in this instance, an injury of any kind, nearly 60%, or an overuse injury, 45% in the previous year. And again, because they don't have that protective cross-training element. Athletes who played their primary sport, or dance, for more than 8 months of the year were more likely to report lower extremity overuse injury, 2/3 as likely. So these are our dancers. So our elite dancers dance 10, 11 months of the year, some of them, without a break. So bearing in mind that we need to factor in periods of extended break, as well as factoring in rest during the week as well. And athletes who participated in their primary sport or dance for more than the hours a week of their age, so if you're 15, you only do 15 hours of dance, they were more likely, nearly 1/3 as likely, to report injury. So it's specialised athletes, it's the athletes dancing all year round, and it's the guys who are doing too much. Those are the athletes who are getting injured. Alright, so some general guidelines. Total training per week should not exceed their age, and you need to consider if they're doing other activities that needs to be factored in also. We need to integrate some of the activities that we want them to do, like strength conditioning, balance work. We need to integrate them into the classes, and I'll show you how to do that in a little while. In general, highly specialised sport is not recommended before the age of 15. So the majority of dancers, once they get to 15, if they're at the elite level, dancing is all they're doing, but it's not really ideal. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is, but it's just something that to have at the back of your minds. So for those athletes, they need to have at least a day or two off per week. Okay? And by off, we don't mean doing lots of other things, we mean off. Rest, recovery, recuperation. Dancers need to be able to make decisions regarding their participation, so they need to be involved in that conversation with their parents and their teachers about how much training they're doing. So use of a training log, and I'll show you how you can do that really simply or using technology later on. And we need to monitor how much competitive participation younger dancers are engaged in, and to make judgments about whether it's appropriate for them. So here we're going to look at, this is just I suppose looking at that sweet spot stimulus again for dancers. So if we undertrain, we get no physiological change. That means we don't get fitter, stronger, we don't get better. We also have increased injury vulnerability. So even though we're not doing as much, we're not building up that strength to protect us. So strength is very protective, and we're engaging in too much recovery time. So too little, no good. Acute overload, we get positive physiological changes and some minor performance improvements, and this requires minimal recovery. We're not doing a massive overload. But if we progressively overload, and it's a concept of super compensation that I'll come to in a minute, we get the better changes. We need a little bit longer to recover, and this is where people make a mistake. They don't tend to allow enough recovery, and that's when we get into overtraining. So with overtraining, we have a failure to adapt, and the dancers will disimprove. So more is not better. after a certain amount. They needed more time to recovery, and there's a big risk of injury and burnout. Okay, so this is what overtraining syndrome looks like. So I want for yourselves, for if you're a dancer or if you're a teacher or a parent, are any of these signs and symptoms familiar? So washed out feeling, tired, drained, lack of energy, mild aches and pains in the joints and the muscles, sudden drop in performance, insomnia, so poor sleep quantity, poor sleep quality, headaches, generalised poor health, and a decrease in training capacity or intensity, so that they're just not able to do as much as they want. Then some kind of low-level psych stuff, some moodiness, irritability, depression, lack of enthusiasm for dance. They're just like not interested. More injuries, and then for some people they just want to exercise, they want to just train, they want to be doing it. So the problem with all of this stuff is that it's very difficult. It's very difficult to reverse. It comes on gradually, and as teachers and dancers ourselves and parents, we need to monitor for this kind of stuff, because it's going to lead to worse performance, more injuries, problems down the line. So from sport, again, I know I harp back to sport a fair bit because there's more research there, and we are athletes at the end of the day. So players' fatigue and sleep are significant predictors of injury, and they might be something that we'd want to monitor again. Football stress, football injury increases when they have exams. So again, when we're monitoring our load, we'll talk about it in a sec, we need to be cognizant of individual factors. And there is an unusual increase if there's an unusual increase in load in the week prior to injury than the 4 weeks prior to that. So we found this in dance. So if you have an unusual spike that's bigger than kind of the last 4 weeks, we'll see an increase in injury. So ramping up suddenly, all of a sudden, it's a really bad idea. Okay, so supercompensation, and I spoke about this. So very simply put, supercompensation is the process where we have a training load, and it leads to a little bit of recovery. But when that training and recovery can be balanced in such a way that the eventual outcome is an improvement in performance, that's called supercompensation. Okay, so again, with training, we'll see a little bit of fatigue, tiredness, and a drop in performance, a little bit of recovery, and you should see then an increase in all those factors. So what we're aiming for is that a balance of training and recovery that will lead to overall improvements in performance, strength, flexibility, whatever it is you're working on, just that'll add to this increase in dance performance. So if we're looking at what that would look like over a year, now this is just what we call a macro cycle. So this is building up very, very gradually, okay? So we have no massive big spikes, and then we're going to drop down, up, and then drop down, and we head then into a period of rest. So there's nothing here October and November. And what you'll see very clearly, and we know this, is that injury rates follow load. It's not rocket science. We do more, it affects us more. So how does that then, how do we apply this to Irish dancing? So this is some research that I did looking at dance load in adolescent Irish dancers, and I would have shown this to you previously. So over the course of the year, what we saw was big peaks and troughs of dance activity, and fairly static other type of physical activity, so fairly static cross training. And what we saw in the research was that when we had these big spikes, we had lots and lots of injuries following them. So we shouldn't be seeing big ups and downs like this. It should be far gentler, far gradual. And this is one of the problems that we have in Irish dancing, that we're not really doing this carefully. So this is where periodization comes in. And periodization is just fancy planning. That's all it is. So it's a process of structuring training into phases where each phase has specific aims for the development of the dancer. We look at it at a very high level. So over the course of a year, then we break it down into smaller blocks, and then we look at micro level, week by week. And the idea is that we adapt the person's physical, psychological well-being, we build up that resilience so their performance up, and we taper in time for performance, for competition. Okay, so it's just a plan, but these are the elements of the plan. So we have our macro cycle. So this can be a year. In the example that I've given you 3 macro cycles. So it's a big chunk of time with a specific aim at the end of that time. Then we have mesocycles. So mesocycles are typically 3 to 6 weeks, and they have a specific purpose. So it might be working on balance, it might be working on stagecraft, it might be working on mental strategies for performance and so on. And then we have microcycles, and microcycles are your week by week training sessions. So in Irish dancing, if you want, and this is not by any means complete, this is a calendar of events that we just looked at really, really quickly to see when we could do feshes. We can still dance in December, as we all know. But if you want, particularly in Ireland, UK, parts of the States, you can dance at a fesh every week. If you are mad enough and you are wealthy enough to go to feshes every week, you can do it. Okay? So this creates a situation about how do we identify what's important, what's not important? How do we plan so that our dancers aren't doing this, where they're going to get absolutely destroyed from dancing every week? So this is a calendar that I would propose for Irish dancing teachers, and this is probably one of the most important slides that I'm going to present today. So this is a calendar, and it runs from August to July, weeks 1 to 52. And I have broken down the year into 3 macro cycles, so 3 big blocks with specific aims attached to those blocks. So macro cycle 1 is kind of going to be your August to December, and you're preparing for your regional qualifiers. So your qualifier for the world, wherever you happen to be. The second macro cycle then is kind of your January to April to Easter, preparation for the World Championships, and 3 is preparation for International Summer Fesh, the NANS, the Europeans, whatever is happening in the summer. And you'll notice for each of the macro cycles there's a preparation phase, there's a performance phase, and then there's a rest and recover phase. And they are all built into that. So for instance, in this phase here, and as they run one into another, we might have rest July, might have rest for half of August. We might come back, work on our workshopping, and then we're back into our preparation phase. Our preparation phase will include, and it might run a little bit longer, it might run up to here. Our preparation phase will include other feshes. So the teacher identifies 2-3 feshes, preparatory feshes for your big qualifier happening here. And after then, you take a rest. You rest and you recover. And then you repeat that cycle. Prepare, fesh, rest. Prepare, fesh, rest. Okay? This calendar of events then is broken down into mesocycles. So these are 8 blocks is what I have done here, 3 to 6 weeks each, and they work on a separate facet that's going to improve the dancer. So strength and flexibility. So we're coming back after our summer rest and our August rest, we're coming back into our workshops. We might want to start looking at this kind of stuff. And as we go on, we work on different things. And it's not that we do strength here and we forget about it along the year. We just focus on it, and we bring some of the key learnings or the strategies from each of these blocks, and we apply them throughout the year. So it's just to maybe focus on separate aspects that can improve performance. And they support then the macro cycles. And then the microcycles. So there's 52 of those. And this is really where the hard work comes in terms of planning. So what I would say to teachers is select your big feshes. 3-4 big feshes, and you'll know what they'll be. And then select your supporting feshes. And it allows you then to plan, and it allows your parents to plan, it allows the dancers to know what's coming up. And there is a certain amount of buy-in, of course, that you're going to require. Some parents are going to want to dance every week, but your responsibility is to say that is not ideal. Feshing every week is not good, it's not appropriate, it's going to lead to burnout, and it's about creating this ethos of focus and peaking at the right times for your dancers. A lot of parents will be very happy. So some of the load management principles. So plan your workload very carefully. So increase your weekly workloads very incrementally. And we'll look at an example of that in a second. Avoid spikes in your weekly load. You don't want to go with, I'm doing 50 units a week this week, 52 next week, 55, and then I go up to 82. That is a recipe for injury. Within your microcycles, your week, try and alternate hard, moderate, easy and rest days. And that minimum of 1 to 2 rest days a week. That has to be built into your calendar. It has to be an important part of your calendar, and you have to explain to your dancers and make sure that they understand that if they are dancing an extra day at home, that is not good for them. So they might think, I'm getting an extra bit of practice in. It is not good for them. It is not allowing their body to recover, replenish. It is not allowing their brain to take in all the changes that they have done to create better dancers. As we said previously, the hours of training should reflect the dancer's age. Don't overtrain fatigued muscles, and I spoke about that in my last talk about cross-training and what's appropriate and what isn't. And then adjust on dancer wellness. So this is where the individual dancer responsibility comes into it. So if the dancer is doing exams, if they're going through some sort of an illness, if there's stuff going on at home that's going to increase the levels of stress on them, you need to be able to allow them or to empower them to bring down the load, the amount that they're doing. So considering fatigue, general health, well-being is very, very important. And to have that understanding and to have that trust with your dancers that if they tell you, look, I'm just really tired, that they can take it down a notch if they need to. And ensure training is as fun as much as possible. So trying to create a good dance environment, that's, I suppose, for everybody. Okay, and now just on rest again, and it's something that I bang on about an awful lot because dancers just don't rest enough. So rest is not a dirty word. Any other athlete that you look at, rest is scheduled in because it's recognised how important it is. So recovery time is important for the body to adapt to the stress of exercise, and that's when your real training effect takes place. So when you exercise, if you're doing it appropriately, if you're doing it at that level that is required to grow and build, you cause tissue damage, and then it repairs, and that's how you build strength. But you have to allow your body the time to repair, to build that strength. When you exercise really hard, you deplete your energy, you deplete your fluids, so you need, again, to allow time to replenish those resources. If you don't allow this time, the body will break down eventually, and you have that overtraining syndrome that we spoke about, where dancers just physically and psychologically just burn out. So general concepts or ideas in terms of structuring the weekly load, if we look at this one, so we're kind of alternating moderate, high, low days, and there's a rest day built in here. And what we see is gradually over the course of the week, muscle soreness will build a little bit after our big sessions, and it will drop down, ready to recommence again the next week, so that we don't go up, and then we're up again, which can be a real problem. So if we were to continue with high levels of training and no rest, this muscle soreness would just increase. What also happens is that our willingness to train will recover. So we start off full of beans at the start of the week, and we drop down. And then if we allow a light session and a bit of a rest, it comes back up again. So it's about controlling just the wellness of the dancer as much as you can. So this is probably the other important slide that I want to draw your attention to. So this is a proposed weekly calendar. Now, it's going to be different for everybody. Not everybody will have the flexibility to move around when they do classes. But what I've shown here is so it's 4 microcycles in essence. So it's 4 weeks, and you can do it like this in blocks. And what we have here is we have rest days, either 1 or 2 rest days a week. I've factored in my feshes. And if we look at the classes and how we've scheduled them, we'll see that there's a balance between light, heavy, moderate classes, but there's also building in other stuff, okay? So Monday, we're going to do lights, and we're also going to do some balance. We're going to do strength conditioning at home on Tuesday, then we're going to have a relatively heavy class. So those would be kind of a moderate heavy. Then we're going to rest, another heavy day, rest, and then we have a fesh, okay? So fesh days, as we all know, they can be, even though the dancer doesn't dance a whole lot to the high level, there's a lot of hanging around, there's a lot of they're just wearing days. There's a lot of just fatigue and a kind of enduring the day and then getting the results, warming up and cooling down and getting dressed and undressed. So feshes are heavy days, so you need to just be appropriate in terms of how you consider them when you schedule. So after that, again, we've got a light class again. Then we've got mental practice and relaxation at home. So this is a non-dancing day, but it is engaging in things that are going to help the dancer improve. Heavy day, moderate day, heavy day, light day, light day. So when I say things like lights and balance, if you choose, you can have everybody do it together. But if you have, say, 20 kids in the class and they're dancing in 2s, 3s, 5s, whatever, the other kids can be working on their balance exercises at the same time. Similarly, like with their core work, with anything at all. For HIIT, you might want to do HIIT once a month, and it's a fitness test, and it takes 15, 20 minutes. And you might do that sometimes in class, sometimes not. So it just takes a little bit of imagination. It certainly takes a bit of effort, but in this way, you're not going to burn your dancers out, and they're going to be fresh week to week. And And you're also working on lots of other stuff that'll keep it interesting for them. So it's not just in, dance, home. It's all the other stuff that'll just give them that extra little edge, and that'll keep them healthy and keep them strong. So the other important part of this is that you need to know what's going on with your dancers. So you need to be able to monitor their load. You can't do everything. You can't say that was a 5. You found that moderately difficult. Only the dancer can say that. And that'll take a little bit of training and practice, and kind of negotiating with parents and dancers and creating that ethos in the class. So buy-in is really important. So educating your parents, telling them the kind of stuff that I'm telling you, that we're doing this so that we can make sure that dancers peak at the right time, that their performance improves all the time, and that they're not going to burn out and get injured and just get sick of dancing. You have to record a couple of key metrics, but keep it really simple, and I'll give you examples about that. So things like obviously how hard you find the session, so your RPE, your rate of perceived exertion, by the time. But you can also maybe look at things like fatigue and wellness that we know are important things in determining how the dancer is feeling and doing. Plan. So that plan that I showed you, that's a job for teachers to sit down in the summer to just create their calendar. I guarantee it's a lot of work, but I guarantee that it will give you structure, and that it'll give you confidence that you're doing the best that you can for your students. And don't be afraid to tweak it. If it's not working, try something else. Build in backups. So I don't think any of us could have perceived that we were going to be all teaching at home and worlds were going to be cancelled and everything. But what I mean by build in backups is for your dancer injured. So can they maybe do certain dances? Can they come and work and start the conditioning? What can they do? So just have some kind of backups for dancers who might be compromised. Or if you get sick, what's the plan if you get sick? What are you going to get your dancers to do at home? And then rest. I know I keep banging on about it, but rest is as much a part of the plan as everything else. Don't skimp on the rest. Even put that in first. Maybe start with your fesh and start with your rest days and fill in around that. Apologies. So, and the other thing is we need to do stuff apart from dance. We need to teach our dance a little bit differently. So how do we monitor? So this is a really simple example. This is your pen and paper example. So what we have here is just a little banner telling us what rate of perceived exertion is. So it's a 1 to 10 score. 10 is dancing flat out, the hardest you can, absolutely fit to drop at the end of it. 1 is rest. So dancers will be able to tell you where they are. So you'd expect kind of set days, if they're doing lots of flat out work, would be up around here. Lights kind of probably down around here. So they say that session was a 4, that session was an 8, whatever. And then you record the hours of dance for each session. So not just the day, so for each session. So for Irish dancers, it's typically just going to be 1 session a day. So for instance, on Monday, this person danced for 2 hours. It was about a 5, a moderately hard session. So their load for that session is a 10, arbitrary units. And we do that for all the weeks. So we had a rest day here, so we've nothing here. And then we calculate the overall the total at the end of the week. You can also put in, say if they start to do like if they play another sport, stick it in as well, because you want to know what their overall load really for the week is. And then the more important thing is you compare this number in red to what's been happening in the previous weeks. So 3 weeks ago we did 46 load units. Week 2 or 2 weeks ago we did 48. 1 week ago we did 52. So we're seeing that nice gradual increase, which is what we want to see with appropriate periodization. And now we're seeing a big jump up to 73.5 units. So maybe a 40% jump. That is a spike. So that indicates that the dancer is probably doing a little bit too much that week. And you need to be mindful that they have an increased risk of injury this week because they have just had a sudden spike. So really simple. The dancers need to fill this in themselves. So I would recommend that all dancers have a little notebook where they record stuff like this, and they also record any particular exercises that they're doing to monitor their progress in that, recording their balance measures, i.e. how long can you stand on one foot with your eyes closed for, and you were just recording your progress there. So I think a little dance notebook is a really good idea for dancers. And then the teacher just needs to check in, or the parent needs to check in and say, or the older dancer needs to go, okay, I have a spike here. I need to maybe take things down a little bit next week, or look at doing something a bit differently. There's also, for those of you who want to go a little bit more high tech, is a dancer wellness app. This was developed by a colleague of mine, Brenton Surgener, from when he was in Hong Kong working in the Hong Kong Academy for the Performing Arts. It's free on Google App, Google Play, Google Play or the App Store. Apologies. And as of last year, it was available in all these countries. I know that there's a lot of American listeners to this. I'm not sure if it's available in America, but I can find out and maybe he can make it available there. But this app is for the dancers to self-monitor. So it records your load and your rate of perceived exertion and so on. But it also records things like your sleep, your readiness to train, your fatigue, your general wellness, loads and loads of different parameters. And it's useful for dancers just to see, yeah, maybe I'm doing a little bit too much, or I could work more on that, or my nutrition isn't great, or my sleep is not great. And it just allows you to really consider all of the facets that link or that can impact upon your performance and your wellness as a dancer. So as I said, you can look at other parameters. So things like fatigue, readiness to dance, general health, I think are good ones because they're all associated with injury. So and you can have a very simple scale. Now this is not in any way evidence-based. This is just me saying 1 to 5 is kind of bad to good. So say for instance, felt quite fatigued on Tuesday, good on a Sunday. Overall score is 21. Readiness to dance the same. General health was very poor. Maybe the person felt very sick that day, but feeling better on Saturday or Sunday. And again, you're just looking for patterns here. So high scores indicate good, low scores indicate bad. So 3 weeks ago we were 31, and that's steadily dropping in terms of general health. Again, kind of a bit of a drop in readiness to dance. And this person was very good last week. Was getting much better and it's now dropped down again. So again, it's just indicative of what might be going on, and just to flag things up. So it takes a little bit of discipline for people to fill these in every day, but it's definitely worth trying to see if it'll flag things up. People kind of have an awareness that they're not feeling great and that they're not dancing great, but numbers are really good to reinforce and say, okay, this is probably why. Okay, so that's kind of the main training load monitoring, designing, periodization session as such. So have a crack at that. I'd be really interested to see how people got on with designing their calendars, see if it made things, if it was useful, if you found that it just helped your dancers to maintain that high level performance and wellness throughout the year. The next little bit is about tapering. So honestly, and I address this to all dancers, teachers, parents out there, what do you do the week before a big fesh? And one of the images that comes to mind with me is people on the warm-up floor at the World or any of these big feshes, and they are sweating buckets, as we say. They're absolutely going hell for leather, and they're dancing the next day or 2 days. And I'm just going like, it's too late, what you're doing now is you're just going to make your situation worse. So some of the reasons people do that is that they're afraid they're going to lose stamina, they're afraid they're going to lose strength, they're going to lose that sharpness. But what we know is that it takes between 17 and 14 days to lose anything like that. Now, that's again very individual. A lot of it is dictated by age and the individual makeup of the dancer. So it's a bit of trial and error as to, okay, I can start tapering a week, 10 days, 2 weeks beforehand. So this time is a time for rest, mental practice, sleep and relaxation. Mental practice is really good. It's sitting in the corner or sitting in a quiet place, going through your steps. So okay, I need to really overcross there. That cut needs to be higher. I need to point the back leg. My heel needs to be turned out. All the small minutiae that is the polish when you dance. So breaking it down, step by step. And what happens is it reinforces those patterns from our brain. So this is something that we do with people who have stroke or brain injuries. The pattern is there, but they're physically unable to move it. But what you do is just repeatedly going through that pattern in your head. It replicates what you do. Your brain doesn't know that your leg isn't moving. So you're kind of replicating physiological things that are happening in your body, albeit at a lower level. So it's refining those patterns to support polish. Something really good to do when people are injured as well, so that you come back nice and sharp. You, of course, can dance during this time, but it's just that you reduce the intensity or the frequency or the duration. You reduce the overall amount of dancing that you're doing. Short, sharp bursts, tip through it, make sure that you're that you're on top of things. So this is really important. So if we look at a kind of a general macro cycle again, we're building up, building up, building up, building up, and then we have this unloading element here. So this tapering block, and then we very quickly go up for our competition. So we want to take it down. It is good for you to take it down a couple of weeks. So we don't have this kind of research in dance, but we have it in sport. So these are the physiological changes in response to tapering. So capillary density, so your fitness essentially, a load of these are all related to fitness and use of energy. They all either stay the same or they get better. Lactate, stuff that we don't want, that decreases. All of this stuff, endocrine system, immune system improves. So it is really good. So just some examples here in an Olympic distance triathlon. Swim pace could drop from 130 to 124 per 100 meters. Okay, so that's a significant improvement in speed. Bike power improves, and run pace, so they're running faster. Okay, so taking a break, tapering down, doing less, resting, focusing on relaxation, sleep, and light sessions can lead to significant physiological improvements. What about psychological changes due to tapering? Improvement in all of this stuff. Anger, fear, fatigue, confusion, mood disturbance, vigor, stress, sleep quality. So all the kind of stuff that happens coming up to a big competition. Now, not all of this, but there's a certain amount of anxiety and stress that's associated with a big competition. So tapering down takes the focus off dance the whole time, and it improves these things. You're going to have an increase or stable tension, which is to be expected because you have a big event coming up. But there's clearly identified physiological and psychological reasons to stop the intense practice a week to 2 weeks before a big fesh. Okay, so take it down a notch, folks. Get rid of those warm-up floors. And finally, the last thing I want to do is workshops. So this is my image of flogging the dead horse. So we've lots of workshops. So pre-season is the main one. So we will definitely have workshops when all of this madness, COVID, finishes and everyone's back in. And I know that teachers are doing an amazing job doing online classes, but we all know that a dancer dancing on a practice pad or dancing in their living room is never going to be the same as a class where they have to move. It's just much more demanding. So even though they may have been dancing, they're not going to be at their peak by any stretch of the imagination. So what I'm going to say about pre-season applies to when we come back after COVID as well. So focus on the quality, but understand that the sharpness will not be there, and don't be pushing them for that sharpness. Allow time. It's a great opportunity to work on your general fitness and build up your base fitness. So what I have seen in my experience as a physiotherapist is a lot of injuries pre-season because teachers are getting dancers in and we're going hell for leather, we're going to dance flat out, everything straight away at a really high level. And dancers will just break down, so they need to be built up. So periodization again for this, build them up, and use workshops to work on other stuff. So it doesn't have to be all dance. So you can work on strength conditioning, you can work on new material. Teaching new materials, obviously the obvious thing that workshops are for balance. Apologies there. So just working on those other things that we've spoken about, and it's a great opportunity to do your big calendar, to set your plans, to agree your goals, and to educate your parents and your dancers and get that ethos, get that culture started. So coming back after COVID is a really good chance to try and put some of these things in place, periodization, the workshops, the tapering, and so on. So don't flog your dancers to death before the season even starts, is the takeaway from there. Okay. So overall on this session, so the key takeaway points are to plan early. So sit down, look at your calendar of events. We all know the big events that are coming up. Look at the smaller events. Look at when you're going to schedule in big breaks, small breaks, and start to create your macrocycle, your mesocycle, and your microcycles. Give it a go. See how you get on. Try and create a culture of surveillance. And what I mean by that is not Big Brother stuff. It's meaning monitoring, so that the dancers monitor their stuff, and that you kind of debrief with the teachers and the parents to say, yeah, it's pretty steady, or no, it's ramping up, and there's lots of other stuff apart from dancing, exams or whatever is going on in the person's life, so we need to be a little bit mindful here. taper and rest. So build in your taper. Make sure that the dancers understand that it is good for them to taper. Work on that mental practice, just bringing down the amount of physical practice, rest, sleep, doing other stuff that they enjoy, hanging out with their mates, computer games, whatever it takes. Take their mind off it. As I said, those workshops are a great opportunity to build a really good base for the season going forward. So thank you for everybody who's going to listen to this. I'm really sorry again that we started late. We'll know better for next time. So apologies. I don't know there was people waiting. And I promise next time I'll be on the ball. I'm not the most tech savvy with this YouTube setup. I'd like to really thank my fellow researchers. So Emma Redding and Brenton Surgener in particular. They are both leading international figures in dance load, and they've helped me a lot with the information that I've presented here today. Scott, my partner, Complete Dancer Project, and Kieran O'Sullivan, who are huge contributors to these resources as well. If there's questions, people can certainly contact me via our Facebook site, Complete Dancer Project. We have our YouTube channel that's up and running-ish. So we'll post all the videos there. So hopefully people will be able to see those. Instagram, I'm even worse on Instagram than I am on YouTube. But we'll post resources there. Maybe people can help me on that. But if people want to access some of our stuff or contact me, you can contact me via there. Just to let you know about the book, which has everything we discussed and a whole lot more, and there's a promotion on that on the ebook promo 40. There's the web address. Next time we will have a few sessions planned, so we're hoping to have a nutritionist come on and talk to you about dance, and Scott and I will do a Q&A live at some stage. He's much better at this technology stuff than I am. So that is the end of this. I have to figure out how to turn it off now, but thank you all. I hope that you'll get something out of it, and I hope that this gives you food for thought about how you can really build your performance in terms of planning, periodization and tapering. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye.